Okay, we're now recording. So I sent everybody their unknown results, which you should be able to find those tests listed in exercises 35, 36, 37, and they're pretty much in chronological order. Not all of the tests described in the lab book are necessarily were provided for you in terms of the results, but the vast majority of those tests are in that document I sent you, emailed you yesterday. Okay, so we were in the process of going into Blackboard, so I could just show you that I did just a very minor tweaking of the Word document entitled Writing the Report of the Unknown, the format here, this guy right here. So I would suggest you print that off, have that handy so you can look at it. In fact, we should talk a little bit about it right now. Note the due date, which is a Tuesday. Okay. Like 4 weeks from today, I would assume, or so, right? Yeah. And the reason I thought it would be helpful to maybe talk a little bit about this is because you may want to begin to work on this over the break. I'm not saying you have to. It's not due for a month, but some of you might say, I want to at least get part of it written so I don't have to worry about it after we come back from break. Because as you all know, once we come back, even though it's like 3 weeks, it gets really crazy. Lots of reports due, other assignments due. And I just find that if you wait till the last minute, it's just going to be really a nervous, anxious time for some people. So we're trying to minimize the stress as best we can. So, I wanted to talk about it, get this to you before the break. So what I'm looking for, again, 30-point report would be title page, which is just your basic name, title, the course title, the date, maybe triple space or quadruple space between those headings, just like you would if you were doing a comp paper, right? You've all done those. And so the next page would begin with the introduction. And it's here that you're going to be providing information to the reader, background information to the reader that would be really important for them to know as it pertained to these various tests that you theoretically have performed on your unknown, even though you really didn't do it. We're going to pretend you did. So when you go to write this, write it with the intention that somebody that has never studied microbiology or knows nothing about unknowns, would be able to follow what you did and could actually even replicate the experiments that you did or the inoculations that you did. So pretend you're the instructor. You're teaching the reader. Your mom, your dad, your sister, brother, uncle, aunt, friend, whatever should be able to read this and understand exactly what you did and why you did it and the results you got and why you think your unknown is X. Okay, so just keep that in the back of your head as you go to write this. So the introduction is, again, that first component or part of the report that I'd like you to type the term introduction there so that the reader knows this is the introduction. And here you will be talking specifically about the various tests you did, talking about the biochemistry, explaining the function of that particular test. Was it to look to see if the bug was an aerobe or whether it could metabolize the amino acid tryptophan, and all of those different tests need to be addressed here in the introduction. Most of this you can glean from the lab book, but perhaps you'll go online and look at some stuff. That's great too. You can include that, but make sure you're addressing each of those tests. You will also want to be very clear in describing to the reader what constitutes a positive test result from a negative test result. So if we're testing for the degradation of tryptophan, we'd be looking for the presence of indole. That's an end product of the tryptophanase enzyme, breaking that amino acid down. And the positive test when you add Kovacs is the formation of a red layer at the top of that broth. If it did not produce the tryptophanase enzyme, if it did not break down tryptophan, and you don't get indole, does anybody remember what color you would see?
Yellow.
You would stay yellow, exactly. It'd be the same color basically as the broth, right? That was Vera, right?
Yes.
Yeah, good job. Okay. See a typo here. So that's the introduction section. Then after that section, you're going to double space and begin the materials and methods section. And this is where you're going to be talking about the methodology behind the various tests that you performed. Now,
I have a question.
Go ahead.
If like in the test, like one of the tests we're supposed to do is like the gram stain. So do we like describe like the procedure of a gram stain, or do we just like say a gram stain is performed?
I think what you should do is list the steps of the gram stain.
All right.
Yeah. Now, another question you're probably wondering about is, do I need to list all of the aseptic techniques, the flaming of the mouth of the test tube, the flaming of the inoculating loop, and that kind of stuff? And the answer is no, and I've indicated that right here. So don't worry about aseptic technique steps. Don't worry about talking about wiping down the bench top. Don't talk about how you need to lower the flame intensity to heat fix the slide. Okay, that sort of stuff we will assume is taking place. But any of the critical steps, the times, the reagents added, the color, the color changes that we're going to observe will come in the results section. But any of the procedural materials and methodology needs to be described. And you can do that with a bulleted listing or a numerical listing if you feel that would be more logical and helpful for the reader to follow. Think about how you would like to have it presented if you were reading it, okay? Don't put it all in the big, big paragraph. That is just tough to read.
Yeah.
Just be logical about it, okay? The results section, again, make sure you're typing these headings at the top so the reader knows what section he or she is coming to. I'd like you to develop a table for the results. Again, I think that's a very logical, organized way of presenting it. It's going to be the easiest way for the reader to elucidate the various tests and what your discovery was. However, you should make sure you list not only the name of the test, but as I've indicated here, in another column, what would a positive test result be? For example, positive indole would be red at the top. Negative, as Vera said, would be yellow. Okay, that would be a separate column. And then the very last column, this fourth column will say, is going to be what your test results indicated. I just think that makes sense for the reader, right? The name of the test, what's positive, what's negative, this is what I got. Now, I do mention here in the handout, if you inoculated an API 20E strip, do you remember me talking about this in lecture?
Can you say that again?
Do you remember me talking about this API 20E strip?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Not everybody would have done that. If your bacterium would have been a gram-negative bacillus that was oxidase negative, you would have been a candidate to use that multi-test strip. In other words, your bacterium fell into a particular family called the Enterobacteriaceae family. And some of you, maybe more than half of you, would have been eligible to do that, but the other half not. Obviously, I'm not going to give you the results of that strip. I don't think I need to do that, but had we had lab, you would have done that inoculation of those 20 different compartments. Remember me talking about that? And it's too bad that we didn't do that because it's kind of fun. Does anybody remember how this strip is used to figure out what the unknown is?
It's like you basically like use like the culture you're putting in like all these tubes, and then you have to like put like some chemicals that changes the colors.
Right. In some of the little cupules, you would have to add a reagent like Kovacs maybe, and look for a color change. You're right. Others would just have the built-in indicator in there already. So you just look for a color change from say yellow to red or green to blue or whatever. So once you've got the results done, what do you do then?
From there, you can like eliminate like some possibilities. Yeah.
Anybody else? I should have quizzed you on that today. I told you had a strip of paper with 5 squares. Each square gets a number, and that 5-digit number is what you'd look up in the book. Remember that? Do you remember this?
I do
or not?
now.
You don't
Yeah, I
remember
remember
talking
now.
about this? I did talk about this.
Now it rings a bell.
Okay. And each of those little digits of the 5 digits came from an array of tests within the 20 compartment strip. Like the first 3 were given a particular point value, a 1 or a 2 usually. And so any tests that were positive, you would check that off and you would add those numbers together, okay? And that would give you the 5 digits basically, depending on how many positive tests you got, how many points were associated with each test, and how the tests were grouped. So that's kind of the basis for the strip, the test strip. You would evaluate it, add up, do a little bit of simple math, add up the numbers, come up with a 5-digit number, look it up in a book, and it would say Serratia marcescens or Bacillus subtilis or whatever. And hopefully that would have confirmed what you thought it was based on these other tests that you've done too. So anyway, just thought I would mention that. You could have taped that in, the results, had you done one. And then what I have here is, I'm going to take this out. I do not want you to tell me what your unknown is in the results. This should be down in the discussion section. I don't know why it was not placed down there. Let's put it right here. So in the discussion, you are basically arguing your case as to what you think your unknown is. Now, how are you going to figure that out?
From the various things you conducted.
I'm sorry?
Like from all the information you've gathered, like if you conduct like the gram stain and like you get a certain color, you already know like it, like if it's pink or it's purple, then it falls under this category, and then it eliminates like other possibilities of bacteria.
Absolutely true, but how are you going to take all of these 20 tests and determine your unknown? You should have looked this over, so you should know what I'm asking.
Is that when we would have used like Bergey's manual?
Well, if you had Bergey's, it might be helpful. Yes, that's true. You could definitely use Bergey's, which you won't have access to, obviously, but there are many online sources, reputable online sources that you can use. Now, I think of it, be careful when you go to the net. You'll probably see data from other lab reports, from other reports of the unknown that other college students have done. You be very careful when you use any information that a student published on the net, because it may or may not be right. You should be using reputable sources here. Okay, so just, you kind of already hopefully know that, regardless of what the discipline is that you're studying. But back to my question, what's going to help you aside from Bergey's? You should have read about this in the lab book.
Isn't it exercise 9? It has all those tables in it.
Yeah, it's exercise 39.
39, sorry, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Oh, is that the dichotomous key that you were talking about?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. On page 280 and 281 are 3 dichotomous keys. Now, they may or may not be helpful to you, but that's the sort of thing you've got to start to look at as you begin to try to determine what your unknown is. There's also a table, I think, at the very end of this exercise there on 284. That could prove helpful as well. So those are the sorts of tools that you can use. There's other stuff on the net, on the internet, that you could also utilize, other dichotomous keys, flowcharts, and that sort of thing. And if you happen to use those as part of your argument to the jury as to what you think your unknown is, you make sure you include that with the report of the unknown. When you do the Dropbox thing, when you submit this to me, you make sure any of those sources you include. Okay, you can scan them, attach them, save and attach, whatever, you know what I'm saying? And then finally, at the very end of the discussion, I'd like you to get into some description of the medical significance of the bacterium that you think you have, if there is a medical significance to it. Perhaps there is and perhaps there's not. Or maybe there's some interesting thing you read about with regard to its environmental presence in soil or water. You know, you should be definitely, as you're doing this research, looking for interesting, pertinent, factual stuff that you can put into the discussion that describes more maybe the medical aspects of the bacterium or whatever it might be. So I'm looking for a good, healthy chunk of information, not just a paragraph or two. I'm looking for a couple paragraphs, chunky paragraphs about what's important, what's interesting about your bug. And then finally at the end, of course, is the literature cited. Cite any and all references you might have used. You'll, of course, all be utilizing the lab book as a reference, but maybe you go into the text and pull some stuff out of there that you include, or sources from the internet, or what have you. So, questions on the format of the report of the unknown?
When we're citing the sources, do you want it in a specific, do you want it in APA?
Well, I think I mentioned down here either APA or MLA.
Okay.
Make sure it's one of those reputable, recognized formats. It's interesting when I read literature cited sections of students' papers, and maybe it's because I haven't done one myself for so long. I see, if I get 5 papers, I see like 5 different formats. And I'm not sure if this is what they learned in Comp 2 or online referencing is certainly not the same as a hard copy text, but just make sure you're using a reputable format. Other questions? So if you want to get started on this now, you can. If you want to wait until the 27th to do it, that's fine, whatever you want to do. But I think you have enough that you can start. Maybe make a goal of getting the introduction and the materials and methods done before the break or something. I don't know, whatever works. Just be knowing that once we get back, it's gonna get busy. But I want you to enjoy your break as much as you can enjoy it. All right. That's what I wanted to mention about the report of the unknown. Just as a sneak preview of future labs, I have not really thought about what we're doing once we get back. I'll give some thought about that over the break, but I'll probably be giving you some data, some results. I just haven't thought about this very much yet, but we'll do our best to address these next few weeks coming up, remaining weeks in lab. That's about all I can say about that. Okay. So last call for lab questions before we maybe switch to lecture. Okay. All right, let's turn our attention to lecture then. I had, I think, sent you an email yesterday indicating that I would like to just kind of talk about topics that you're finding particularly challenging or that you'd like to review. I hate to just spend one day on one chapter, but that's sort of the way it's going to go for chapter 11, is it? I think. Yeah. Physical and chemical agents of microbial growth. This chapter actually is one that I think of all of the chapters that we cover is probably easiest to read without having any sort of super technical aspects to it. But in order to keep up with our schedule, that's sort of what I had to do. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, you can't use part of the break to look at 11 as well. But after today, we'll be going on to 12 once we come back from the break. And I did look over those videos that I think it was Corey. Didn't you share those a week ago or so? They are good. They cover the chapter from beginning to end, as I would do. So I would just recommend that you watch that particular video that I have uploaded in Blackboard. In fact, all of the remaining chapters of his series are there, and they correspond exactly to the same chapters. He's using, I think, the 9th edition text as opposed to the 10th. So some of the tables may have a slightly different background color, but there is very little change in the information. It's 99.5% the same. I think I also mentioned in the email that there are occasional slides that I might have expanded upon or added to. So it would be helpful maybe to have my PowerPoint nearby as perhaps you look through the video and he refers to specific slides. You ought to be able to match them up pretty easily, but there'll be occasions when I may have some stuff added, sidebar, box, or what have you. So just throw that out for FYI. Have you had a chance to start looking at 11?
No, I didn't quite get to it like I wanted to.
Well, you were probably focused on the lab quiz. I certainly get that too.
I was.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. Basically, what the chapter does, and again, I'm not going to do a formal lecture here, but if I just pull up the PowerPoint. Let's see. You all see the PowerPoint?
Yep.
Okay. So what it does in essence is it takes you through these 3 major control methodologies: physical, mechanical, and chemical. And some of these you've already heard of. You already utilize dry heat like when you flame your loop or your needle. That's this. Deb utilizes the autoclave to sterilize the broths before you inoculate them. That's this. That's moist heat. So it's quite logical. It's not terribly complicated. It's just a matter of reading through and watching the video. And if you don't want to watch the video, you can read through the chapter. It's very self-explanatory. So that's how the chapter is basically constructed. Questions, comments?
I do have a question about our next exam. Is it going to be on all of chapter 9? Is all of chapter 9 going to be included on it?
Let me grab my syllabus. Trying to recall where did we put part of 9 on the second test?
I studied as if we did, but then I couldn't remember what part of 9.
Anybody have anything in their notes? I'm gonna have to go back in the chapter and just see if I made a note about it.
I think the second test went up to like mutation.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Was it
right.
9.4?
Yes.
Was
Yeah.
it 9.4? So 9.5, it would start at 9.5 for this upcoming test.
I don't think we put anything on mutations in the test.
No. So
So
like
it's-
exam 3 starts from 9.4.
Right,
It starts at 9.4.
yes. yeah.
Okay,
On
thank you.
on page 283. Right. So that's a good question.
Thank you.
I had made a note in my book here, but so that third exam is scheduled for the let's see.
Oh, no.
April 23rd is what it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the old syllabus. Never mind.
Well, no. I have it the week of the 20th to the 24th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, as we get closer to that time, we can kind of decide what day we'd like to have it open in Blackboard.
Mhm.
I'm kind of thinking that Thursday, which would be the 23rd. But, we'll just kind of shoot for around the 23rd. And as we get closer, we'll refine that date and time.
The 21st, we have a lab quiz.
Okay.
So the 23rd would be better, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. We won't get them too close.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can, we'll just kind of tentatively say the 23rd. I'll make a note here. And that'll basically cover, part of 9. 10, remember, we kind of bounced around a bit in that chapter. 11, and then we're going to start 12 once we come back. We'll see if we put any of 13 on the test. I don't like to have you get the information on a Tuesday and then test you on it right away on Thursday. That's just not really kosher. I don't like to do that. However, well, we'll just see. We'll see how it goes. 14 and 15 are I won't say difficult chapters, but they get into a bit of technical stuff, which I hope you will find interesting given the situation that we face ourselves in right now with COVID-19, because it's going to focus on immunity. And you've all maybe heard in the news recently how one potential promising therapy is to utilize blood from somebody who's recovered from COVID-19 and transfuse that into somebody who is currently showing symptoms, or maybe even providing it prophylactically to those that haven't yet potentially been infected. Do you know why they're doing that? Or why they think it's a promising possibility? What does that individual who's had COVID-19 got in his or her blood?
Some form of immunity.
Antibodies.
Anybody.
Yeah, antibodies, right, antibodies. The antibodies were produced by the individual in response to the antigen, which was the virus. So we'll talk about antibody-antigen interaction and how that stops the pathogen from causing problems. There's a number of different ways that antibodies can interact with antigen. So it's going to be an interesting, pertinent way to wrap up the course. It's going to be, just about, they're saying the epidemic is, supposed to forecast a peak somewhere about mid to late April. At least that's the forecast. Yeah, you've all heard some of the kind of the scary projections that have been coming out the last few days in terms of deaths in the U.S. Yeah. So even though it's a scary time, you're living through some amazing history here, too. Not something you like to live through, certainly, but if anything, people are going to be a little more aware of microbes and the role they play. I think I've mentioned this to you guys before, I still am annoyed when I read about how the COVID-19 can live on cardboard for 24 hours or on plastic for 72 hours. And it's like, no, it's not living. It's not alive to begin with. What should we say? What should we say? We could say it's viable for 24 hours. What's that going to do? It's going to totally confuse people because they have no concept of what a virus is. They think it's this living thing. It's not, as you guys know, it's not living. It's acellular. I have seen absolutely nothing in the news that attempts to educate the public as to how this virus works. Have you?
No.
No.
I just find that totally bizarre. It's a perfect opportunity to teach people about some stuff. But
I know. Is there any site that offers anything like that? Anything reputable to like look at what all that, like the COVID and the 19 and what all of that stands for? You know how like we did in class with the H1N1?
Sure. And yesterday's Zoom meeting with the A&P group, the students were asking about that as well. And I have a note to myself right here. I don't know if you can read that. Yeah, it's my to-do list, and that is to put together some information on COVID-19. So I will, kind of give you guys that as well as the A&P students. I've been wanting to do this for a while. I just haven't had time to, but I'll put together some information and some reputable sites. Certainly there's lots of stuff out there that's following the epidemic or the pandemic numbers, not only here in the US, but globally. As I think I mentioned, the Johns Hopkins website is quite good. I find that it takes a long time to load. The graphics are a bit cumbersome. At least I think the uploading of the information just seems to lag a bit. But I was just on MSNBC before we got together, and there was a really nice site that they're using too on this, so I'll include that. Other questions? So your assignment is to begin reading 11. I will also tell you, while we're here, that when you get to that section toward the end of the PowerPoint here, I'm just going to go to it right away. The chemical agents, this one. The book gives you a table. Let me just flip to it. Where is it? Here it is. And I put kind of stars next to those agents that I think you should know. And I know it's most of them, but there are a couple here that are not starred, if you will. So don't worry about those. But I think these you ought to be familiar with. And you know, some of these you already are actually already familiar with. For example, alcohol. You know, the hand sanitizers are 95% ethyl alcohol. So they're effective against lots of different kinds of microbes. Ordinary bar soap, although it says here very low germicidal. Now germicidal means killing. It doesn't kill a lot of bacteria, but what does it do, or microorganisms? Why is it good? What's it do?
Slides them off.
Exactly. It removes any substrates that might be containing the bacterium or the microorganism. Yeah, it acts as a compound that just basically cleans. It rinses the microbes away. Yeah. So focus on these with the yellow stars. And any of you in the healthcare field, you know, are probably familiar with a lot of these different compounds. The use of different kinds of detergents and soaps, iodine-based compounds are often used to prep tissue before surgery. Anyway, I think if you just follow through, this is really pretty self-explanatory. This is a slide that is not in that voiceover video that I was telling you about that I posted from, I forget the guy's name. You should watch this YouTube segment on Joseph Lister, after which Listerine is named. And I think, did I tell you about Lister? I thought I might have talked
Yeah,
to you.
Yeah.
isn't he the glove story?
Yeah.
And that's how he met his wife.
Yeah, yeah. His future wife was a nurse, yeah, that was helping him in the surgeries. And as I said, her hands got very, carbolic acid or phenol is a really rough chemical on tissue. And her hands got blistered and such. Yeah, so he went to the hardware store and sewed a very crude pair of rubber gloves for his nurse. And of course, at the time, he did so to protect her hands. But of course, as we, I think, mentioned in class, what else did that end up doing?
Created the surgical gloves.
Yeah. But aside from giving her comfort physically from wearing the gloves, what other benefit did it have?
Like protection from like germs getting to like
Protecting who?
like the people they're treating.
Yeah, the patient. Yeah. This person that's getting operated on here was being protected from the bacteria that certainly were falling out of the hair of this guy and off the jacket of this guy. You know what I'm saying? They didn't have any concept of or very little concept of the germ theory of disease back in, you know, 1865. You heard the stories of during Civil War. How did they treat somebody whose arm got blown off by a cannonball? Right? Have you ever studied surgery in the Civil War? It's brutal. They pulled him into a field hospital and they sawed the guy's leg off.
Ooh.
They gave him just bite down on this.
Bite the bullet. Yeah, bite the bullet. That's where the, you know, that old, I don't know, cliche or wives' tale of the guy biting down, you know, and historically they even have accounts of where they would hire bouncers or big husky guys, and they tried to knock the guy out, the patient out, hit him in the head. And it sounds crazy, but they knew what it was going to be like if they did it when he was conscious. Yeah. So they initially started using what was the
Carbonic
anesthetic?
acid?
Not ether, but they used to put it on like a cotton swab, cotton ball, I should say. And they would after they learned a little bit about the effects of this, I think it was ether. And that would kind of put the person out for a short period of time. But you know, how much do you add? It could be too toxic. It might even kill the patient. But it was just hit or miss as to how to keep this person under while they did the surgery, if they even had that ether available. So it was a crazy, crazy Wild West surgery, you know, back in those days. But Lister really went a long way in protecting the patient from postoperative infection because of the use of this carbolic acid, which was actually sprayed on, a very fine mist was constantly sprayed on the tissue. Now, it certainly, as it affected the nurse's hands, right? It also affected the open skin of the patient. And so it was toxic sort of to the patient's skin, but nonetheless, there was a real improvement in terms of postoperative infection rates compared to not using it. Because if you had open body cavity surgery in those days, you had a better than 50-50 chance of dying from postoperative infection. Even if the surgery went okay, you die from the infection.
Mm.
I mean, that's how pervasive bacteria are in you know, in a room in a hospital where they're doing autopsies, you know, on the other end of the room. Probably not that bad, but you get the idea, right? So it's very interesting to study the history of surgery. So that's called carbolic acid or phenol. Okay. So again, you should be starting to read the chapter, watch those videos that I posted. Try to get a jump on this if you can over break. Again, I don't want you to work all break or anything like that, but once we come back, we'll be getting right into chapter 12. Drugs, microbes, host, elements of chemotherapy. And if there are certain segments of these chapters that I feel are going to be a little challenging or confusing or what have you, I will put together some short PowerPoint voiceovers, kind of like I've said or posted. And there may be certain sections of these chapters that we may omit certain parts of too, and I'll let you know about what those are. Any questions? Comments?
Nope.
Everybody's surviving? Your class is going all right? Bella, how's the Bonus classes going?
Good. They're all online now, so a lot of teachers are just emailing and not doing Zoom meetings.
Yeah,
which is
I know
interesting.
several of my colleagues also are just, I don't know, they're providing email access,
Yeah.
but there's no one-to-one interaction, which
Yeah.
if I was a student, I would be very perturbed by that myself.
It stresses me out a little bit. Like one of my professors, he emailed us in the beginning and goes, I have no access to internet. So your final grade is just going to be your grade of your final and I'll figure it out. So like, if I don't get an A on that, then I just don't. Isn't that crazy?
That's unfair.
I think it's extremely unfair. I'm going to say something about it, but like, What are you going to do?
Not happening.
Yeah. So we had a bunch of like other assignments that we could have gotten graded on, and he's just dropping them all and saying that when we take the final, that's going to be our grade. I just don't think that's fair. And we have like 2 grades in so far, 3 quiz grades in so far, and that's it.
Oh,
So
that's not fair at all.
and it's a prereq for grad schools for basically everyone in the class.
What, I won't ask who the instructor is because I wouldn't know them anyway, but what's the course?
It's medical terminology.
Oh.
Oh,
Yeah.
so glad I did not take that course.
Yeah, so it's not good. That one, I'm probably gonna have to do something about that. But for the most part, all my other professors are doing a good job, I think.
They're doing Zoom?
Yeah, a lot. A few of them are doing Zoom. I have the same professor for a couple classes, so she does them all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Everyone else figured it out. He's the only one who hasn't.
Mm-hmm.
For like my AMP2 class, Professor Philip, he does like YouTube videos and stuff, and then he just posts them like on Blackboard, and we listen to them.
He's looking up previously made YouTube videos, or he's doing the videos?
It's not really like a video. It's like a video, but you don't really see him. So it's like voice lectures.
So he's talking, but you don't see anything.
Yeah.
And he's talking about the chapters and.
Yeah, it's like this, but yeah, you don't see him.
Do you find that difficult?
Not really. No, it's not.
So he's just narrating the chapter for you, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh-huh. And does he upload those to Blackboard for you? Or?
Yes, he does.
Uh-huh. Great.
And you can also like watch it on YouTube and stuff if you're on YouTube. So yeah.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And like for my other class, we also do like a Zoom chat, but my professor, he said like for the past 1 week, his internet has been having like problems, so we will not be holding like Zoom meetings till further notice. And like just like 2 of us always like attend the Zoom. Apparently some don't really like it, so.
I don't know how you would not like Zoom.
I like it.
I think it's really almost as
Yeah.
good as being there, not as good, but close to it.
Well, that's why it's so hard to do the email classes, because you're sending like 50 emails asking questions, where if you just get on Zoom, you can ask them and then it's done.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I just don't understand why people wouldn't use it.
Well, right. It just, as an instructor, I would not want to be trying to type everything I'm trying to say, and then you're going to have to say it 5 other times to 4 other students.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's easy. You just click a button and you can see each other. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like it's just good like talking to other people and seeing other people's faces. It's good because like all the people I see for like the past 1 week are like the people I live with. Apart from that, like no one else.
Yeah, so it's good mental health to see people too. I agree, you know. My siblings are back in Iowa, and I sent them an email today, and I said, hey, you guys want to Zoom? Because the 3 of us have not gotten together in years. And it's like, why did I wait until this to even think about this? I mean, the technology was there for a long time. I just never thought of it, and I don't know. So I guess it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you won't be having Easter with your siblings, maybe some of you, or in my case, my kids, and it's gonna be tough. I don't like it, but what are you gonna do?
It's gonna be like one normal day.
It's gonna what?
It's gonna be like one normal day, like
One
any other
normal,
day.
regular day, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to share, chat about before we break?
No.
Okay, so Bella, you must live like 2 time zones east of us here, huh? Because your clock says like what, 12:15?
That hasn't worked in forever. I didn't even know. I don't know why we hung it up in here.
She lives in Labrador or somewhere like that.
Yeah, that's funny. I didn't even notice.
And so your brother or your dad or you must like hunt too. Obviously, you've got a cabinet of guns,
Oh,
and
yeah.
bows, and I think we
They
were
make
talking.
their own.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we were talking about that one day.
Yeah, my brother makes his own bows. So, and so does my dad. So
That's great.
they've been working on that a lot.
Over this time?
Yeah, because there's not much else to do.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I was thinking about tying some flies. I like to do that, so I might.
Oh, yeah. Trout opens tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm going to go tomorrow. I have an exam in the morning, though, so it kind of.
Yeah, but see, look at it this way. When you go in the afternoon, the water will warmed up, the fish will be more active, and everybody will be gone. You'll have the whole place to yourself.
That's what I'm thinking, because we have a popular stream near me, like 40 minutes away, and I feel like everyone's going to get up early and try to get there first.
Yep.
So we're like going to go around like 2 or 3, I think. Maybe a little earlier.
Good.
But
Good luck. That's great.
thanks.
Yeah. Okay, well, I hope you guys do have an enjoyable, relaxing break as best you can. If something comes up, you want to ask questions, I will be checking my email daily and all that stuff. And so feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I will also be working on the lab quizzes. I'll get those corrected in the next few days. Generally, what I try to do is free up the answer key, or I should say free up your quiz, which will have both, you know, the correct answer and if you got it wrong, what the correct answer was. Within, usually I do like a 24-hour after you take it, I free that up. So I think what I'll do after I leave you guys go is I'll go right into the quizzes and I'll get those questions that required a little bit of writing done so that next tomorrow at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock you can go on and see your scores.
All right.
All right.
All right. Then we will plan to reconvene on the 14th, I guess, right? Tuesday the 14th.
Yes.
So
Yes,
so try to get a jump on the report, at least get that started if you can. Get into 11, and if you want, start 12. I guess that's what I would do. Okay.
Yep. All right.
Okay, guys.
Sounds good.
Thank
See
you.
ya.
See ya.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you. Have a
Bye.
good holiday.
You too.
Bye. Thank you.
You bet.
Bye, everyone.